The book is about many, many things. Primarily, it tells the story of one chemical, the most widely used herbicide in the world, which is glyphosate, or the key ingredient in Monsanto's branded Roundup. But what the story really is about is this pervasive pesticide use, glyphosate and other pesticides that have really taken over farming and agriculture and are leaving pesticide residues in our food and in our water and in our bodies. And creating a host of environmental problems. So, you know, it's a big message, but I think it's an important one. I've been a journalist for more than 25 years, covering a range of corporate issues, financial issues, politics, things like that. For the last 20 or so years, my focus has been on food and farming, and everything related to that, including Monsanto and its seeds and chemicals. And I left Reuters in late 2015 and went to work as a research director for US Right to Know, which is a consumer information and education group. I thought it was really important to, you know, share a lot of the information that I've learned in my research over the years, information that it's often hard for the public to find. For any journalist writing about Monsanto, it's a very tricky game. It's very dicey. The company is very interested in influencing media coverage, and if you are writing things that run counter to their message, that raise questions about their products, they are very aggressive in trying to shut you down and trying to control the message and control the narrative. So, you know, they spend a lot of time trying to pressure me and pressure my editors at Reuters to influence the stories that I would write. Monsanto would employ tactics, you know, that are pretty common. They would call my editors, they would call me and complain, they would ask for retractions or corrections even when nothing was factually wrong with the story. Many times they would want a face-to-face meeting to come to offices, and, you know, they would criticize me heavily for what they called false balance. They said even if nothing was wrong with my stories, that I should not be giving any credence or quoting anyone who disagreed with them, essentially. That only their science was valid, only their position was credible, and anyone who raised red flags about their products or had any criticism to offer was not valid and should not be mentioned at all in my stories. For many years at Reuters, you know, I had a pretty crusty, tough old dog editor who, you know, as long as the story is fair and accurate and balanced, and, you know, a truthful account of the news, you know, that was what we were supposed to do, and my editor was very supportive at Reuters. In the last couple of years, it became more difficult. We had a change in editorial leadership for the bureau that I was assigned to, and that individual was much more concerned about the criticisms from Monsanto and the chemical industry. He was much more worried about the pressure that came from them. He's no longer with Reuters now, but it made it very difficult to tell truthful stories. So there's a pretty deep body of research surrounding glyphosate because it's the most widely used herbicide in the world in our history. So researchers from around the world have been looking at this chemical for a number of years and looking at its impact on the environment, on biodiversity, on soil health, and of course on human health because it is used in food production. And this is published, peer-reviewed science, and it's shown a number of red flags, a number of reasons to be concerned about the chemical. The one that most people seem to be concerned about now are the links to cancer, specifically to non-Hodgkin lymphoma. But glyphosate has been tied to, you know, kidney problems and potential liver disease, as well as a range of other human health problems. Monsanto has a really aggressive strategy to try to suppress information that is not supportive of glyphosate and its products. It is far-ranging. They work to harass and discredit scientists whose work shows harm associated with this chemical. They employ networks of scientists around the world who are receiving financial compensation, many times from Monsanto, without it being disclosed publicly. So these scientists will often author papers or policy briefs, or sometimes articles are prepared and published in magazines. And all of these will appear to be independent of Monsanto while supporting the safety of this chemical. And yet we find in the documents that Monsanto is actually many times writing these articles for professors, writing the research papers that look to be independent, and telling these scientists who appear to be independent, telling them what to say and what to do to protect Monsanto's profits. The documents that we've obtained through the group I work for, US Right to Know, as well as documents I obtained at Reuters, and documents that have also come out through litigation in the United States, show a very long and concerted effort by Monsanto to use different individuals, again, who appear to be independent and unbiased, who in fact are connected to Monsanto through financial arrangements or others, and basically employ them as sort of secret soldiers to go out and carry out attacks on legitimate scientists, to criticize evidence of harm associated with glyphosate, to criticize journalists like myself and others. It's a very brilliant strategy, but it's a very deceptive strategy, and it's designed to fool the public and fool policymakers. So the lawsuits in the United States are really interesting. There are about 3,500 people who have sued Monsanto so far, alleging that Roundup, which is the glyphosate-based product that Monsanto's been selling, causes cancer and has caused them and their loved ones to have non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And in these lawsuits, Monsanto has been forced to turn over just millions of pages of internal documents that show the company scientists and officials discussing ways to manipulate the science, discussing ways to manipulate public opinion. So the lawsuit is something really interesting to watch, because we're going to have more and more internal Monsanto documents coming to public light. There are a number of documents, yes, that have come to light that show Monsanto discussing the science, discussing epidemiology and toxicology and their vulnerability with the science that is out there. The documents show Monsanto working on ways to suppress science, to attack the International Agency for Research on Cancer, for instance, which found glyphosate to be probably carcinogenic. So the documents very heavily and in great detail discuss Monsanto's concerns about the science and their efforts to manipulate the interpretation of the science. I think that the lessons of Rachel Carson were really important, and people paid attention to her early on, and we saw the formation in the United States of the Environmental Protection Agency. We saw environmental defense organizations really blossom around the world. But I feel like her message has been forgotten, really, over the last couple of decades, certainly, as these chemical companies have become more powerful and they're pushing these pesticides into our food production system and pushing them to really pervasive levels. And unfortunately, our regulators, both in the US and in Europe, seem to be more interested in what the companies are telling them and less interested in protecting the public. It's profit over the public. Yeah. It's protecting the profit goals of these giant corporations over the protection of the public. So Monsanto did not attend this joint committee hearing of the European Parliament in October, even though they were requested to appear and to discuss these questions about glyphosate safety. It was very smart on their part not to appear, because they really don't have good answers for the deceptive practices that they have employed. The documents, show very clearly Monsanto's own scientists discussing how to ghostwrite research papers and how to manipulate the science and how to suppress information that shows harm with its chemicals. So the less that they can, the more they can avoid answering questions in a public forum like that of Parliament. I mean, I think it's smart on their behalf. It doesn't serve the public well, but it serves them well. There was a body of the World Health Organization that we refer to as JMPR, the Joint Meeting on Pesticide Residues, which looked at dietary exposure for glyphosate and concluded that there was no reason for people to be concerned about that, no reason for harm. Now we know that at least 2 members of that JMPR group that looked at glyphosate had financial ties to the chemical industry, did work for the International Life Sciences Institute, which is a chemical industry funded group. So again, you see financial ties and this network of the chemical industry influence on organizations. And that's really what you see consistently is if the chemical industry money connects to it, it supports the safety of glyphosate. If it's completely independent, it shows harm with glyphosate. The chemical industry has really come out guns blazing to try to attack me for my work and my book, and claiming that I'm a terrorist or that I want to see people starve around the world or that sort of thing, which of course is crazy. The only thing that I'm advocating now and that I've advocated for my entire career as a journalist is the truthful and accurate information being shared with the public. It's the job of a journalist, it's the job of a researcher to bring to light information that is hard for the public to find, but that the public has a right to know. And that's all I'm doing here. And if the public and the policymakers have truthful and accurate information, then they should be able to make the best decisions. Glyphosate, as we know, it's pervasive. It's in our food, it's in our water, it's in our bodies. It's in the food that you're feeding to your pets and to our livestock. And it's having a real environmental impact. We're seeing a loss of diversity. We know that honeybees, for instance, are picking up honey or picking up glyphosate as they move around the countryside and from plant to plant, and it's turning up in our honey. And we know that the loss of the monarch butterfly, the great decline in the populations of the monarch butterfly, are due directly to heavy use of glyphosate. Monsanto doesn't even counter that at all. They acknowledge that and are working to try to help restore that butterfly population. But glyphosate has truly become such a pervasive pesticide that it's having very profound impacts on our environment and on our health. Well, farmers are certainly aware that pesticides generally are dangerous and are substances that need to be respected. Pesticides are known generally to be dangerous to human health and to contribute to a range of diseases. So farmers are really on the front lines of this and put their lives at risk when they produce our food. So yes, farmers certainly would be aware of the risks. Now, glyphosate has always been considered more safe than other pesticides. So I think unless a farmer has developed cancer or knows someone who has developed cancer, they're not going to be as concerned about the safety of the chemical as they are going to be about how well is it working for them in the fields. And in the United States, what we're seeing is that glyphosate isn't working that well anymore. It's been overused to such an extent that it's not very effective anymore. So farmers are using more and more pesticides now to try to deal with the fact that glyphosate isn't working as well as it used to. I think that policymakers in the Netherlands and throughout Europe need to be sure that they're really paying attention to the authentic, independent science and not the science that we know through the documents has been manipulated by Monsanto. We know that there is a wide body of work out there that Monsanto has worked very hard to make it look like glyphosate is safe. We know that. We know that there is a wide body of independent, published, peer-reviewed science that shows there is reason to be concerned. And I don't understand why politicians would follow the lead of Monsanto, a company that we know has billions of dollars of profit at stake, why they would take Monsanto's word over the word of independent scientists. It makes no sense to me. Consumers need to be aware and to educate themselves and inform themselves and pay attention to these issues. It doesn't sound like a very interesting or sexy topic, perhaps, pesticides, but they are, again, in our food, in our water, in our bodies. They affect the health of our children and our environment, and we need to pay attention to protect our future. The documents show us that Monsanto has attempted to manipulate public policymakers to approve this product over and over again and to allow these very high levels of use. We know that the company has tried to do that. We know they've used secret and duplicitous methods to do this, and it seems like the politicians should pay attention to that and not let themselves be duped by this giant chemical company.